Buenos días. Bueno, muy buenos días. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy en este 10º Foro de Revistas. Os doy la bienvenida a todos en nombre de Marta Ariño, presidenta de ARI, y Joan Juan Los Huertos, presidente de Conectia. A los que estáis hoy aquí desafiando el frío polar de Madrid y a los que nos seguís online. Es una alegría volver a vernos. La vuelta a la normalidad es fundamental, no solo para nuestra salud mental, sino también para el crecimiento económico. En este sentido, ya todos los editores estáis realizando eventos presenciales, con muchísimo éxito. Fiestas, formación, congresos, carreras, todo tipo de competiciones. Recomendamos el regreso del papel a los lugares públicos, a las salas de espera, a las peluquerías, a los bares y poco a poco el regreso al placer de leer una revista en cualquier lugar y en cualquier situación. Tendréis noticias de ARI en este sentido la próxima semana. Han sido meses muy difíciles en los que los editores no han dejado de ofrecer sus contenidos en papel y online ni un solo día, pero los ingresos cayeron, especialmente los de publicidad en papel, y durante el 2021 vamos lentamente remontando. Pero hasta en los momentos más difíciles, los editores seguís lanzando nuevas revistas, especiales, monográficos, poniendo en marcha nuevas líneas de negocio, ingresos por usuario, canales de vídeo, podcast, formación. No tenéis límites. Y por eso es un orgullo trabajar en un sector capaz de reinventarse cada día, para seguir cumpliendo su misión de informar, de divulgar y de entretener. La audiencia del medio Revistas, papel y online, es mayor que nunca y sigue creciendo. Mientras los lectores y usuarios nos acompañen, seremos capaces de superar los desafíos que sigan viniendo. Quiero agradecer a Google y a las entidades colaboradoras Cedro, Deloitte, Protec Media, SAPI, ANDP y UDNE su participación en este 10º Foro de Revistas. Vosotros lo hacéis posible. Muchísimas gracias. Y sin más preámbulos, pues ya comenzamos. Inaugura este 10º Foro de Revistas doña Nadia Calviño, vicepresidenta primera y ministra de Asuntos Económicos y Transformación Digital.
Buenos días. Es un placer inaugurar este 10º Foro de Revistas organizado por la Asociación de Revistas de Información y la Asociación de Prensa Profesional Conectia. En primer lugar, quiero felicitarles por la iniciativa. Intercambiar opiniones entre compañeros de profesión siempre es enriquecedor, y más si el tema a tratar es tan interesante como el de hoy, la edición de revistas tras el COVID. Los medios de comunicación ya estaban inmersos en un proceso de transformación estructural antes de la llegada de la pandemia, derivado del auge de la digitalización, del surgimiento de nuevos formatos y de la influencia de las redes sociales. La pandemia no ha hecho sino acelerar algunos de estos cambios, y esto hace que el sector de la comunicación se enfrente a importantes desafíos, que son los mismos del conjunto de la sociedad. En segundo lugar, me gustaría poner en valor la resiliencia, la creatividad y la capacidad de adaptación que han demostrado los medios de comunicación durante estos largos meses, a la hora de mantener a la población informada, entretenida, acompañada y al tanto de la actualidad. Sin su importante labor como garantes de la salud de nuestros sistemas democráticos y su papel fundamental en la cohesión social y territorial, los ciudadanos serían un poco menos libres porque estarían peor informados. Ahora que hemos dejado atrás lo peor de la pandemia, que la recuperación está en marcha y que España será uno de los motores europeos de crecimiento el año que viene, tenemos ante nosotros una gran oportunidad para impulsar una reindustrialización en clave verde y digital y una recuperación justa, que haga de España un país mejor. El plan de recuperación es la hoja de ruta con la que contamos para emprender esos cambios, movilizando inversiones y reformas por 140.000 millones de euros de aquí a 2026. Este volumen de recursos equivale a lo que España ha recibido en transferencias de fondos estructurales desde nuestra adhesión a lo que entonces eran las comunidades europeas. Todos somos conscientes de lo que hemos logrado juntos gracias a este apoyo financiero en estos últimos 30 años. Así que imaginémonos lo que podemos conseguir si invertimos bien estos fondos de aquí a 2026. Por último, me gustaría destacar que depende de nosotros tomar las buenas decisiones para sacar el máximo partido de estos recursos y promover las reformas necesarias para transformar y modernizar nuestro país. Para eso, necesitamos el apoyo y la colaboración de todos los ciudadanos, de las administraciones públicas, las empresas privadas y especialmente de los medios de comunicación, para que hagan de testigos y transmisores de la información en esta nueva realidad que queremos construir, incluyendo las revistas y el resto de formatos y profesionales del sector, que sean, en suma, un vector de transformación y futuro. Les deseo un congreso productivo y espero poder acompañarles en persona en una próxima ocasión.
Bueno, agradecemos mucho las palabras de la vicepresidenta y estaremos muy atentos a esos fondos y ayudas europeas para ver cómo hacerlas llegar a este sector y a cada una de vuestras empresas. Quiero agradecer también a Pablo Montesinos, diputado y periodista, como muchos de vosotros, que nos acompañe hoy y su atención hacia este sector. Muchísimas gracias. Y ahora, sin más preámbulos, os presento a James Hughes. James es el presidente y CEO de FIP, la Asociación Mundial de Editores de Revistas y Medios Globales. Anteriormente trabajó en la industria editorial internacional para la BBC Worldwide y BBC Magazines, lanzó la revista Olive como editor y fue editor de revistas como Top Gear, Good Food, Easy Cook, Lonely Planet. También ha dirigido la empresa BBC High Market Exhibitions y para mí es uno de los mayores expertos a nivel mundial en el medio revistas y en el camino y el futuro que nos espera. Thank you, James, for being here. The floor is yours. You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Okay, I'm going to say buenos días a todos. Gracias por invitarme a hablar a este evento. Espero que la presentación les resulte útil. Muchas gracias a Yolanda y Eduardo por todo su apoyo y por invitarme. Siento mucho que no vaya a presentar en español. But as you can tell, mi español no es muy bueno. I could do it in Portuguese, but not in Spanish. We're going to translate the presentation, so I hope the translator is here somewhere at the back. Thank you very much for the translation. So I hope you can understand what I'm saying. If you have any questions, though, please do come and find me at the end of the presentation, and I'll be happy to answer those. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about trends in the media, quite general trends in media, but also some specifics focused on publishing as we at FIP see them. And this presentation reflects all the things that we've had with coronavirus. I need my clicker, sorry. And hopefully a little bit of a sense of what comes after coronavirus. But first of all, I just want to tell you about who we are, who is FIP. So we are one of the world's largest media membership networks. Our membership consists primarily of the magazine companies, although they're not called magazine companies anymore. That's one of the things we'll come on to later. And what we do is we help our members to learn by sharing knowledge and expertise across the world, and we help you network with media and technology partners worldwide, and increasingly now we help you train as well, so we do have a training business as well. Here are some of the companies that are in our network, and you can see that we have a large global membership. We also have a very much larger network of companies across the world that we work with who aren't members, and the presentation that we're doing today reflects their knowledge collectively. So it's designed to be a global view, and it's designed to reflect both the B2C market and the B2B market, because I know there are companies from both sectors here in the room today. So let me start by being a little bit provocative and saying that magazines used to be a really easy business to be in. This magazine, this is Time magazine from the year 2000, the president then, George W. Bush, was Person of the Year in 2000, and this probably represents the high watermark of the industry, the absolute peak of when we were at our most successful. And we can call the approach that we had to magazine publishing in those days Christmas in July. So what do I mean by Christmas in July? Those of you who run lifestyle magazines, when do you do your Christmas shoot? You do it in July, because it takes you 6 months to get the magazine on sale. In those days, our lead times were very long, but the fundamental model for both B2B and B2C was the same. A bit of a shorter lead time for weekly titles, but nevertheless, for most magazines, it wasn't that different. This was the basic model. We spent a lot of time writing stuff, taking pictures, making it look nice, making it look fantastic, and then we have our colleagues in the commercial department, in the advertising department, who would sell some advertising on the promise that lots and lots of people would read the magazine, and sometimes we could prove the promise, and sometimes we couldn't. Then we get somebody else to print it and distribute it. Then we mail some copies to subscribers in some countries. And in the US, you didn't really worry about whether that made you any money or not, you just mailed them. In most countries, you sent a load of copies into a retail chain, and you didn't really know what happened to them. Most of them were wasted. And we could crank the handle and turn this machine every week or every month and get a fantastic result. Now, I'm making it sound like it's a stupid way of working. It's not a stupid way of working because it worked. And we made lots and lots of money out of this way of working. How much money did we make? Here is the Meredith Corporation. Meredith, just been bought in America by a big digital company, was the biggest magazine company in America. This is their results from the year 2000. They made a profit. Where's the profit gone? Here. The profit was $250 million, more or less, on turnover of $1 billion. A profit margin of 25% from making magazines the way that I showed you before. And that margin was getting better year on year on year, and Meredith was primarily a print magazine company. So this is an example of how well this business worked. The problem, and George Bush looks sad with the problem, is that then it all started to change in the early part of this century. Those of you who've been in the business a long time will know this. There were signs in the early part of the 2000s when our circulation started to slowly decline. But it was the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009 that really triggered the sharpest decline. We saw some very large downward steps in circulation and advertising, and the industry never recovered from those. And of course, the key underlying factor in all of that was the rise of digital media, which is why we're here today. So, exactly what did the decline look like? Let's look at the revenue picture that resulted. Now, I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking, is this guy just going to stand here and be negative for half an hour? No, don't worry, there's a good bit coming later. So, this is where we are right now. This is the impact on newspaper advertising revenue in America in the period from 1960 to more or less today. But you could put here magazine advertising revenue, and you could put any country in the world. The picture is pretty much the same. The message, though, is that all of the gains that we made as an industry since 1960, over the course of 40 years, were wiped out in 20 years of the internet. For B2C companies, this had a very severe impact on our P&Ls. We lost half of our revenue, more or less. And for B2B companies, we lost, in some cases, 100% of our revenue, because all of that revenue migrated to the internet. B2B companies that used to make a lot of money out of job advertising, that went, right? And the position is no better in circulation. These are the circulations of UK newspapers in about the same period. They're all trending the same way. The picture would be same for magazines, same for anything. Doesn't really make any difference. The point is that it's declined. Now, obviously, this has created enormous challenges for our industry. We've all had to take a very long look at our cost bases. We've had to look at the way that we do business. But I'm here today to tell you that the explosion of digital media brings with it tremendous opportunities, that one of those opportunities is to rethink your print business, which has, in my view, a bright future. But the critical message that we as a trade association, that we as an industry body give to our members is that you must spend your time focusing on these opportunities and not thinking about the business that's gone. Because that's gone, that's not coming back. I've sat in board meetings in newspapers when I worked for a newspaper where the head of the advertising department for the newspaper said, the internet is just a fad, the advertising will come back. And the boss believed him. This was 6-7 years ago. It's not coming back. So we can spend our time trying to cut our way to making a profit, all that kind of stuff that we've done in the last 20 years. But if we do that, we're missing the fantastic opportunities that are there with digital. But I want to start, first of all, by just spending a minute looking at the nature of the industry and how this has changed over the last few years. So, it used to be the case that our industry worked along three fairly simple axes. The content or the service type that we were offering, the monetization model, how we made money out of that, and the medium or the platform. So what's happened to each of these axes of the industry, each of these dynamics of the industry in the last 20 years? Well, in the last 20 years, we've had a vast explosion of content types. Now, the content types themselves are not new. Video is not new, audio is not new, but what is new is the ability for anybody to create them and anybody to distribute them. And within that, people are coming up with new forms and new formats of video and audio. In the monetization model, we see the looming end of the advertising-based business model. Now, I know there's plenty of people in the room here who work in the advertising world. This does not mean that advertising is dead. It just means that as an industry where we relied 80, 90, 100% on advertising, that reliance has gone and is not coming back and should not come back. It was unhealthy. And for the medium or the platform, I would say that there is the addition of two critical new platforms that we need to consider. So when we think about the content or service type, most of us who worked in the magazine world, we had text, we had images, which were the stuff that we created in our magazines. Then we started to add video and audio. We're now looking, if you're in the B2B world, at data and information businesses. And we have live events, which have been there for a long time, but have now gone through a transformation in the time of hybrid. The monetization model, you have D2C and indirect being the advertising-based model. And I would say that the fundamental shift in mindset that we have to go through as an industry is this shift here. For the last 100 years, we've relied on this. Now we have to rely on this. Yeah? Because there are very good reasons why this isn't going to work anymore for us, which I'll show you later. Then we had print and radio, television, the traditional formats, in-person, added to that desktop, mobile, and social. Desktop was the first, mobile and social, obviously, are much more recent additions to this. So let me just, first of all, talk a little bit about how change works, because a key factor in all of this is the pace of change and the relentless pace of change that we are facing as an industry. This is what we've gone through over the last 20 years. We as humans are very, very bad at estimating how things are going to change in the future. We sit here in the present day and we look back at the past and we go, well, things have changed quite quickly in the past, so they're going to change quite quickly in the future. What is actually happening is that the rate of change is increasing. It's getting faster. And actually, the way that change works is it works in S-curves. A new technology comes onto the market. First of all, nobody has it. Then it gets very, very popular, and then suddenly everybody has it, and there's very little growth left in it anymore. A good example of that is your smartphone. Remember, 20 years ago, nobody had a smartphone. Then only very rich people had a smartphone. And now everybody's got a smartphone, and some people have got 2 or 3. Coronavirus is accelerating these trends on top of the digital media explosion. So what you can expect to see is that S-curves that take less time to reach the top, so this is shorter, but also that the impact is more dramatic. Video conferencing and working remotely is a very obvious example of change that's happened in the time of coronavirus. This is not a new phenomenon, and it's not limited to digital technology. This is another thing that we think, we think we're living in the most revolutionary time in the world ever. No, not really, because if you were around in 1900 and you didn't have electricity, then between 1900 and 1920, when electricity came everywhere, that was more revolutionary than the internet. Much more revolutionary. And there's all sorts of technologies in there that have been revolutionary in their time. Look at shipping containers. Anybody know how stuff used to get moved around the world? Why can you buy a TV for 200 euros? Because in the old days, they used to put it in a box like this. They'd put it in a net, put it on the ship it here. It means you didn't know how big the box was going to be, how big the net needed to be, blah, blah, blah. The shipping container, the standard shipping container, is the reason why you can buy a TV for 200 euros. That was a revolutionary technology in the 1960s. Now we're reaching the point where, with social media and smartphone usage, they are reaching saturation. And the question for us as media executives, with our forward-looking hat on, with our strategy hat on, is what is the next thing off the end of this curve, the end of this graph? What is the next curve that is going to come along and disrupt society, and how can we take advantage of that? And finally, just very quickly, to show that the rate of change is increasing, this is the number of years it took for these products to go from 0 to 50 million users. From the first commercial airline passenger to the 50 millionth commercial airline passenger, 68 years. For Pokemon Go, 19 days. Zoom, which we all use, well, not all of us, because some of us have been bullied into using Microsoft Teams, but Zoom, 400% increase in their share price since January 2020. They would never have imagined that if you told them that in January 2019. So there's a really crucial message, I think, for companies that are going to survive this crisis and are going to survive and thrive in the world of media, which is that you must have multiple revenue streams, 4 or 5 different ways that you can make money, and some of these must be digital revenue streams. Notice I say some of them, not all of them. But crucially, if you rely on one source of revenue, then your business is at risk. This is a message that we didn't understand as an industry for 100 years. So what does this mean in terms of the way in which you should think about your business? This is our suggested business framework for magazine media companies, and this sets out the various aspects of your business that you should be thinking about. And I'm just going to pause on this for a moment because we're going to talk about this for the rest of the presentation. I would suggest to you that there are 4 critical enablers. The enablers are things that you need to get right in order for the whole of your business to function well. Your talent, your people, and your culture, diversity and inclusion, the technology stack, and sustainability. Then there is one underlying business strategy that is emerging as key for the rest of the business, which is data strategy. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then most magazine media businesses, most of us in this room, will have 3 fundamental areas of operation. They'll have print, they'll have digital, and they'll have other. And all of these then break down into some fundamental business lines. And of these, I would suggest to you that the digital consumer revenue stream, this one, is the one that you should be focusing your efforts on, because it's the one that has the most area of opportunity. It's the one that's driving the growth in all of these digital unicorn companies that you see around the world. Now, interestingly, we're seeing in some companies a matrix organizational structure emerging, where there are teams that specialize in things like digital subscriptions and e-commerce that work across the whole business, across every brand, interacting with the brand teams. And I think that's something for us to think about. For B2B, I think the picture is slightly different. I think all of the above still does apply, but to that we must add the key business area of industry data. This has emerged as a really fundamental critical success factor for B2B businesses. You not only have to report on industry data, you have to create it, and you have to be the keepers of it. You have to create and own the key indices, the key indexes that your industry relies on. That would go in here into your other box. From that, you can then build consulting services and all these other things that B2B businesses are doing. Before I get into the framework, though, let's just talk very quickly about coronavirus and what the impact of coronavirus has been. So we can see broadly 3 negative trends, 4 positive ones, and 1 neutral one. The negative ones, print and digital advertising, originally declined by anything from 50 to 100%. I'm glad to report that digital advertising globally has recovered quite quickly to the point that the overall impact across the whole length of the crisis is more or less 0. More or less. Newsstand circulation has declined by 40 to 70% globally, but there are signs that this is rebounding quite quickly. Digital subscription volumes and print subscription volumes are up enormously. Digital subscription volumes, anything from 100 to 200%. Print subscriptions, between 50 and 100% increase in print subscriptions. Website traffic numbers have increased dramatically. This was a problem to begin with because we couldn't monetize them. Now we can. And obviously, the biggest area of impact has been live events. Those of us who had big live in-person activities, these were destroyed by coronavirus, and we're now just figuring out how to get them back. Linked to this as well is the number of jobs that have disappeared. In the US media market in 2020, we lost 31,000 jobs in media. This is more than we lost in the financial crisis. So this has had a dramatic impact on our business. So some positives, some negatives. I hope what this reinforces is that if you had a business that had all of these aspects in your P&L, that you would have had some positive impacts and some negative impacts. If all you had was this, then you were screwed. And you'll continue to be screwed because these crises are going to happen over and over again. Every time we go through one, we think, oh, it won't be as bad as last time. It was as bad as last time. We said that in 2009 with the financial crisis. So let's look at some of the elements of our magazine framework model and see what we can pull from that, starting with data strategy. I'm not going to run through these points. You can read them. You'll get copies of the slides, by the way, so you don't need to take pictures. We'll send you the slides afterwards. But I think this is an absolutely fundamental get right for your organization. You must have a robust data strategy to ensure that you're able to take advantage of the opportunities that digital presents. Crucially, your digital advertising business is going to be further affected in the short term by the loss of third-party cookies next year after, whenever this finally happens. So you must make sure that you're capturing consumer data from all of the activities that they do with you. And this includes print, by the way. In our print businesses, historically, we had an enormous amount of customer data. People subscribing, people entering competitions, people writing letters to us, whatever it might be. We must make sure that we capture that data alongside of the enormous lake of data that we're getting from digital and combine it into a single view of the customer, because it's only by having this data lake that you're going to be able to develop the successful marketing strategies that you need to build in your consumer revenue business. So the first critical element at the top of the, I'll just go back, first critical element at the top there, talent, people, and culture. This is the people you work with and the environment in which you all work. Now, last year, Professor Lucy Kung, produced a fantastic report called Hearts and Minds, Harnessing Leadership, blah, 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 which is available to download from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. If you're thinking about your company and how you want your company to function in the years to come, download and read that report. It's staggeringly good. Leaving aside diversity, which we'll come on to in a minute, there are 4 things I think you need to think about. The first one, and most important one, probably the most important one for the people in this room, leadership. How do you lead? Crucially, are you operating without ego? You have to be comfortable saying, I don't know. When somebody comes to you and says, how are we going to solve this problem? I don't know. How do you think we should solve it? You solve it collectively, you solve it as a team, continuously learning as a group, delegating power downwards through the organization, coaching your teams to succeed. These are all critical success factors. Many companies that you will have seen in the market globally, they do this thing, right? The CEO stands on stage and they have a room like this full of people. All the staff are there. We're doing a transformation program, lots of slides. Transformation program, digital transformation program. How often does it work? Almost never. Because the CEO is telling everybody they need to change. What's actually happening is that your Gen Y and Gen Z employees are going, geez, this company's so old-fashioned. Why don't they do things the way we do them? Why do I have to come to the office every day? Why does the office look terrible? Why can't I just work in a coffee shop? And why, by the way, why can't I launch this new product that me and my friends in the company have thought up? That might be the new product that saves your company, you don't know. They have a completely different way of working, a completely different mindset from us. Sorry, but most of us here are Gen X or baby boomers. We are the past, these guys are the future, and they think completely differently from the way we think. So you've got to have this open, innovation-driven culture that encourages free expression, and you've got to make sure that you take advantage of that. And on top of that, of course, there are 2 big questions around the coronavirus. The first one is, can your company function as a hybrid company? Because this hybrid way of working is going to carry on forever now. People have got used to it. And how do you keep people motivated, focused, and working collaboratively when they're not in the office at the same time, or when they're not in the office at all? I thought this was interesting. This was a presentation that was given by Bonnie Kintzer, who's the CEO of Trusted Media Brands. Trusted Media Brands is what used to be called Reader's Digest. Everybody remember Reader's Digest? They went bankrupt, I don't know how many times, 5 times, 10 times, whatever it was, some stupid number of times. Now they're a very profitable, very successful business in America, with lots and lots of special interest magazines, a good digital business, very profitable, very nice business. Bonnie, when she presents how they did it, at the very top is people and culture. All this other stuff is just enabled by those 2 things. They got the right people and they built the right culture, and that allowed them to do the transformation. Now, related to this is the topic of diversity, obviously thrown into sharp focus by Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter and related initiatives are genuinely delivering change in our industry around the world. You cannot ignore this. This is obviously a moral imperative, but it's also an economic imperative, because if you have a diverse workplace, you have a workplace that is much more open to opportunity. You're accessing new networks of talent, new networks of ideas, new customers, and new ways of working. And as we come out of the crisis, we cannot afford to miss that kind of opportunity. This is also a critical success factor, just going back to the previous slide here. This is a critical success factor for Generation Y and Generation Z. For Gen Y and Gen Z employees, everything is political. Somebody was telling me a story about working in a factory that makes beans. And they're like, well, we make beans. We don't need to have a position on Black Lives Matter. And the younger employees are saying, yes, you do, because even beans are political. So for these guys, it's really important that you have a position. You cannot sit on the fence and do nothing. So onto a more business-focused one, which is technology, the key enabler of technology. Now, this is increasingly commoditized, but there is a divide emerging in this area. You have to decide which side of the divide you fall down on. Do you buy or do you build? This is the view from Axel Springer. Axel Springer's view is they want to build. They want to own the technology that enables their business. So they've bought Solera One, and they've bought a couple of other businesses, and they've started building different bits of technology in all of these areas. They can then sell that technology to other companies as well and make revenue out of it. The Washington Post does the same thing. Smaller businesses rely on outsourced technology services. Software as a service has revolutionized our industry and will continue to do so. You have to decide which side of the divide you fall down on. There's no right answer. You just decide which one it is that's right for you and stick to it. But crucially, and apologies if there are any corporate IT people or CIO people here, don't let your corporate IT departments hold you back. All you people using Microsoft Teams, why are you using Microsoft Teams? Because your CIO or your chief IT guy came to you and said, Microsoft are doing a really good deal to give us Teams as well as all this other stuff we get from them. It's crap. Teams is the worst product in the market, and it's only in the market because Microsoft is in everything else you do. That's a great example. If you took the same approach in e-commerce, you're going to fail. If you use Microsoft's e-commerce platform, I'm sure they don't have one, whatever. But if you use the e-commerce platform just because it's the one you use that's based on everything else, you're going to fail. Yeah? You've got to use the one that's right for you. You've got to be agile. You've got to be prepared to get rid of it if it doesn't work. So if you pick an e-commerce platform and it fails, just get rid of it. Replace it with something else. Companies don't like doing that with IT because they spend a lot of time putting it in, blah, blah, blah. Don't be hidebound by it. It's the same mistake that we made launching magazines and keeping them open because we'd launched them and felt as though we had to keep it open. We've all done that, right? We would never close them because then we'd admit we're failing. Same with technology. Another crucial enabler, sustainability. Now, sustainability has taken a bit of a back foot during the crisis, but that's going to become roaring back to prominence. It's already coming roaring back to prominence as we emerge. Based on what happened at COP26, you're going to see more and more stuff about this in the news. But crucially, this is a hygiene factor for consumers. Consumers are going to start asking you to demonstrate your sustainability footprint. And if you're not up to scratch, they're going to boycott your products. They're not going to use you anymore. You've got to demonstrate to consumers that you understand things like carbon consumption, raw materials usage, plastics usage, recycling potential, and human impact. Do you know where your paper comes from? Do you know where your electricity comes from? If you have gifts if you have an e-commerce business and you're providing products for your e-commerce business, where do those products come from? If they come from a factory in China that's being made by slave labor, consumers are going to find out, and then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And you've got to demonstrate that you're working to minimize these. Now, we have some great examples in the industry already of people doing this. So the top one here is, who's the top one? The top one is UPM, paper company. And all of our paper company friends are doing this at the moment, but UPM, I just used their example because I had it to hand. They have spent a lot of time building this strategy around a 65% reduction in CO2 by 2030, and I think they've even accelerated that. And in the publishing world, this is Condé Nast at the bottom. So Condé Nast have a very good end-to-end sustainability policy as well that they're working towards. Both taking a holistic view of their operations, both really committed to it with senior people involved in the decision-making. And a small example of the environmental impact of digital services, you must think about the impact of digital as well as print. Print is obviously less sustainable than digital, but nevertheless, things like Bitcoin do generate an enormous amount of waste, an enormous amount of carbon, and we have to be aware of that. This is becoming an issue for companies like our friends at Google and Amazon and the rest of them that are really focusing on this now. How do they reduce the carbon footprint of their digital operations? Well, the same applies to us as well. So let's go on to something very positive. which is print and the exciting future that print has got, print's luxury future, which is a little bit of the wrong name for it because there's a couple of ways that print's got a future. Some aspects of print have had a very difficult time during this crisis and the past crisis, but I think there are signs that print is finding its place in the media mix. First of all, there are some brands, you see them here, that have very strong journalism, and they refuse to make this journalism available online because they don't see any advantage to them in doing it. You have The Week, Monocle, Private Eye, I'm sure there are plenty of others. This, by the way, works in a B2B context as well. If you have strong journalism that people must read in your industry, don't put it online. If you want to keep going in print, keep going in print. If people can't get it through online, they will buy your magazine. These magazines are showing increases in circulation. In the UK, Private Eye is already topping 300,000 copies every fortnight, charging £2 more or less. Very, very successful business. You can use your archive to create bookazines, premium formats using archive content. Very successful, very popular, great way to drive revenue. But I think the key trend here is the emergence of print as a luxury product. Now, this is obviously already established with brands like Vogue and Elle and Porter that we see there, but it's now being embraced by others, and I think it is genuinely the future that we need to take. And it has a number of key elements. This magazine here, Apartamento, anybody seen Apartamento? Get a chance, buy it. Huge, great, thick thing. I'm going to use this as an example later on. This is a magazine that a friend of mine produces. Sorry, rude word. It's called The Road Rat. It's a car magazine. I'll talk a bit more about this in a minute because it demonstrates what I'm about to talk about right now. These magazines, these new consumer and B2B magazines, can be summarized as deliver more value and charge more for it. For years, I would argue, we have undercharged for our content based on what it's worth. You must make magazines that have fantastic production values and are packed with content, and you must charge a fair price for them. A good measure is, does your magazine cost less than a bottle of wine? If your magazine costs less than a bottle of wine, you're undercharging. A bottle of wine lasts, I was going to say 2 days, 1 day, maybe. A magazine lasts months. Great, huge, thick thing sits on the table at home, fantastic product. Why are you charging less than a bottle of wine? This is also a question of ego for our industry. I'll come back to that word ego again. We must abandon the idea that a large circulation is a sign of success. Instead, we want profitable circulation. Print is not a large industry anymore. It's a medium-sized one. And we have to think like a medium-sized industry, which means focusing on profit, not focusing on circulation, because it's, we want to be the biggest. There's no value in that. Here's a B2B example. This is Variety. Many of you will know Variety, the entertainment B2B Bible in America. This is its subscription offering. Print, basic, $149 a year. And they have a big subscription and growing. I can't see that. What does it say? Print Plus, $169 a year. VIP Plus, which includes industry data, reports, all that stuff we were talking about earlier. But what's interesting here is they start with print, and they have everything else afterwards. And this is now owned by a digital B2B company. An example in B2C, this magazine I was just about to show you here, The Road Rat. This magazine is 2 years old. It was started by a bunch of car journalists who just were fed up with producing magazines the old-fashioned way. You can see how thick it is. It comes out quarterly. It costs £15, £48 per year for a subscription for 4 issues, and they already sell 10,000 copies. They're making £500,000 in circulation revenue, and it now has advertising. Because it looks nice, and because it's glossy and fantastic and all the rest of it, they have Mercedes, they have Ford, they have Tag Heuer, they have whatever. £500,000 a year circulation revenue, all profit, because this is not on the newsstand, this is only on subscription. You can only buy it on subscription, they send it to your house. And they charge you extra for the postage. So it's £48 a year plus postage. Very profitable model. Another really important factor, I think, to remember about print, and one of the key selling points that we must focus on is trust. This is taken from the Edelman and Reuters Institute research recently in the last year or so, and it's never more relevant now to focus on this. Traditional media is consistently trusted nearly twice as much as social. US and Canada, traditional, social. Europe, traditional, social. And if you look over here, this is trust in different sources of news. I'm always worried about falling off the stage in these things. Trust in different sources of news about coronavirus. Scientists, doctors, health organizations, blah, blah, blah. News organizations, trusted more than the government, news organizations. Ordinary people, blah, 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 blah. Messaging, social media, the least trusted forms, and yet people still use them, but they are consistently the least trusted forms of media. Now, in an era of fake news, this is something the industry cannot afford to ignore. Trust is declining amongst particularly for political journalism because of the increasing polarization of our society. But we must do more to highlight and reinforce the quality of our journalism, the amount of time and money we invest in it, the amount of training and specialization that goes into journalism. Many of you in this room are journalists. You've spent your whole lives working in this field. You know how hard you have to work to get that high level of quality. This is something we need to communicate more effectively to advertisers and to readers because it is an absolute key selling point for us as an industry, trust. So let's move on to the critical business trend at the moment, which I mentioned earlier, which is this move away from relying on third parties for your consumer relationship and developing a direct transactional relationship with your consumers through direct-to-consumer revenue. A number of ways you can do this. Paid content, already very successful for news brands, already the largest source of revenue for some of those news brands. There is e-commerce growing rapidly and a great opportunity for magazine brands, delivered via an affiliate relationship or whatever it might be. Paid events, which are starting to come back now. And finally, building a club around your audience so that you can ask your consumers to transact with like-minded brands based on their relationship with you. To show quickly that scale can come for the right brand, here is the New York Times' success over the last 4 years or so. They've gone from 2.5 million subscriptions to 6 million subscriptions, to 8 million subscriptions, and they're generating more than $500 million in annual revenue. Now, I like this saying from Lucy Kung. The New York Times has done the industry a disservice. They have made the challenge of moving a business from legacy to digital look easy. They do make it look easy. It's not easy. This is the product of 10 or more years of investment in that business, but they have shown us what is possible. But you must remember that not everybody is the New York Times. Magazines, the magazine industry, we have been very, very slow to adopt paywalls. Very slow. To the point that we're now at the tipping point of whether this is going to be a success for us or not. If it's not, if we can't get people to pay for our journalism online, I think that's a very difficult place for us to go to. Nevertheless, for the ones that have done it, there is some success, some encouraging signs. Here you can see The Atlantic, The New Yorker, National Geographic, Wired, Vanity Fair, all in the States, all charging for digital subscriptions, all growing. On average, they're growing about 5% per quarter. I would challenge you, is there another area of your business that's growing at 5% per quarter? If there is, well done, but I doubt there is. You must start doing this. Must start putting paywalls. You're going to see over the next 12 months, we know because we talk a lot to people in the industry, that several major magazine companies are going to launch very large paywall projects to the consumer in the next couple of months. So you're going to start seeing this more and more for magazines. So let's just look quickly at e-commerce, the second major focus of consumer revenue, which for some businesses is as important as digital subscriptions. Most of you know Future Media, which is now, Future is the biggest magazine publisher in the UK. They're now one of the biggest in America as well. 50% of their revenue comes from e-commerce, from affiliate-based e-commerce based around their content. And this gives a good example. Publishers generally don't want to build an e-commerce infrastructure. There are some that have. Egmont in Scandinavia has built their own e-commerce infrastructure, but you don't have to. You can build it through an affiliate relationship. It's not perfect, but it works. It's a natural path to draw readers from your trusted content to getting them to transact with the brands and the products that you recommend. But you must be careful not to abuse that power. I hear people very often say, well, James, how can we build an e-commerce business and have our journalists recommending products? Isn't there a conflict of interest there, blah, blah, blah? Please. Do you really think your journalists are going to recommend products that just for commercial reasons? Try going to your best journalist in your business and say, can you recommend this product so that people will buy it? And watch what happens. There is no need to worry about safeguarding. Your journalists are your best safeguard. They are the best representation of the reader for you to make sure that you're only offering stuff that is genuinely good. But ultimately, we're all in the content business, and one of the key enablers of consumer revenue is using these new platforms effectively. And I would say that there are two key things to consider when you're thinking about new platforms. We've all done the same thing. Amazon Echo came along, these voice-enabled devices, and we all did stuff for them because it was great and it's cool and we want to look trendy and all the rest of it. Does it actually work? Crucially, first question, how am I going to get a consumer to transact with me through these platforms? If you're putting something on Amazon Echo, anybody from Amazon here today? No, good. If you're putting stuff on Amazon Echo, why? For the consumer? Because you're a charity? Because you're being nice to them? You want them to transact with you. You want to buy a subscription, buy something, do something, listen to an ad, do something with you. Don't just do it because it's cool. But secondly, how can I create content that is bespoke for that platform? So for the Amazon Echo platform, again, you're creating a bespoke piece of content that goes out on that smart speaker first thing in the morning when somebody says, tell me the news or tell me the latest from my, whatever it might be, my subject area. That's how you deliver engagement. That's how you then convert that engagement into transaction. Two big areas of content focus, audio and video. In audio, the rise of smart speakers is focusing everybody's attention on how you can deliver kind of brand loyalty and get transactions through that platform. But related to that, the crisis has seen unexpectedly a boom in podcasting. Podcasting was already growing very quickly pre-crisis. During the crisis, it's grown even faster. Now, this is a great way to connect with audiences on a regular basis. I'm going to talk a little bit about podcasting in a second. And then finally, there is video, digital video. Digital video is like these rocks. When we're sailing our ship, every so often the digital video rock pops up, and we steer towards it, and then we crash. And then we wonder why we steered towards the rock, and we sail off again. Digital video is really hard, because there are some big gatekeepers who, sorry to friends from Google, don't give us very much money for the video that we make. And we spend a lot of time and effort creating it. I'll use Facebook as an example. They're a better example. There's nobody here from Facebook. Facebook came to us a few years ago as an industry, came to most of us in the industry and said, create video because we're creating this Facebook, what was it called? Facebook Spaces or Live? What I forget. There's not so many of these things they've done. So create lots of video and put it there and you'll get loads of views and make loads of money. Did we? No. And then what happened? 2 years later, Facebook went, oh yeah, well, we're just doing this over here, so you carry on. It's fine. We'll see you later. And they just left us to it. And we'd spent all this money making video and didn't make anything out of it. So you have to be very careful about making sure that you're not making an investment in something that doesn't have a clear path towards a return. Podcasting is a great example of this. Podcasting is something that does now have a really good, clear path to making some money. Here you can see some data on podcasting taken from the Reuters Institute, latest Reuters Institute report. On the left, the proportion of consumers who listen to podcasts every month. You can see that Spain, up the top there, is one of the highest in the world for proportions of consumers listening to podcasts. And these figures have remained steady, they're growing. We have to see what the impact of the return to work is in the later half of this year. But podcast listening, like anything, is a habit, and the habit has now stuck. And on the right are the figures from selected markets on podcast distribution platforms. Apologies, it doesn't have Spain on it. But in each case, there's always a local provider. The BBC, NPR, ARD, that is providing a way for you to distribute platforms without going through Spotify or YouTube or any of these other platforms that commercially don't work so well for us. Crucially, with podcasts, you now have 2 or 3 ways that you can make money. You can charge a subscription for them. You can bundle them with your other subscription products. You can do native advertising. You can now do programmatic advertising with podcasting. So this is a good example of what we were talking about earlier, a product that has 4 or 5 different ways of making money and is not very expensive to start. So, conscious that I'm slightly running out of time, so let me just look very quickly at advertising and tell you about advertising. And advertising really is a tale of 2 graphs. One is very positive, and one causes some challenges for us. This first one is from the annual PwC Global Entertainment and Media Outlook. Many of you will know this very respected report that forecasts advertising growth for the following years. This is before coronavirus. And this shows you that in these new digital formats, there's plenty of growth. VR, OTT video, internet advertising, video games, and esports, Even some traditional ones, cinema and out of home, music, radio, and podcasts, there's some decent growth in advertising revenue possible on a year-by-year basis in some of these. For traditional media, we will see the continuation of decline, which I think is what we all expected. So if we're investing in these new formats, we at least have the comfort of knowing that there is some advertising revenue there that'll help us to fund some of these projects. Now, when I spoke earlier about diversification of revenue, there's one really crucial point I want to make. Having a digital strategy, having a diversification strategy, does not mean swapping relying on digital advertising revenue for relying on something else. I phrased that badly. You must have advertising as part of your revenue mix. The only thing that's changed is it's not the biggest part anymore of your revenue mix. And these are the areas in which you should be investing to take advantage of the growth that exists in advertising. But when we dig deeper into the advertising picture, this graph from eMarketer really sums up the problem. This is the revenue share from digital advertising in the US. The big blue blocks here represent just 3 companies, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Between them, they control 75% of the digital advertising market, and their dominance is growing. For every new dollar that comes into the market, they're taking about 85 cents. So that means if you're a publisher and you rely on digital ads, you're competing in this little bit at the top, the little tiny white space and the little tiny blue bits at the top there that have got other people in them. And you're competing against every other media business in the world. Disney, the New York Times, Hearst, Condé Nast, they all live in that little tiny white bit at the top. Yeah? In other words, you're trying to be a big fish in a pond that has the Loch Ness Monster living in it, which is these 3 big companies at the bottom. So just be conscious about what you can realistically achieve in digital advertising when you see this kind of market picture. And then at the bottom of our magazine media framework model, there is other revenue, which is where your new growth businesses will live in things like consulting and education, as well as more traditional stuff like events. Every year we produce our annual Innovation in Media report, which is a book on the latest innovation that's happening in our space. It's free to FIT members. If you want to buy a copy, if you're not a FIT member, you can go to the website and buy it. We have at least 13 different business models that you can focus on for the future as new opportunities for growth. And a good example of the impact of the crisis, I would say that of the business models you can see here, about half of them were negatively impacted by coronavirus, and about half of them were positively impacted by coronavirus. Now finally, at the bottom of our magazine media framework is mergers and acquisitions and consolidation. There's a lot of big deals that have happened pre-crisis, a lot of big deals that have happened recently, and I think you will see many, many more to come. Every company on this slide has either closed or been sold or bought something or whatever it might be in the last year or so. We've seen some players buying unusual things. You may not have seen this, but Future, which is a magazine media company in the UK, bought Go Compare. Go Compare is the largest provider of price comparison for insurance in the UK. They made that acquisition because they want to tie their content to the transactional ability around insurance, because they believe their consumers will buy more insurance if they have a recommendation from Future. You've also seen companies like Wyndham buying Travel and Leisure and renaming itself. The point is, there's a different relationship between content and commerce. I'm going to skip over the rest of this because what I want to talk about really is the impact on our decision making. These are the different valuations on a multiple of profit that are being delivered at the moment in the market. And these are driving people's decision-making. In a market where everything is for sale, every company in the world is for sale, every media company in the world is for sale right now. Meredith has just been sold. There are some other large magazine companies, which I won't mention, some of you might be in the room today, that are for sale. Everything's for sale. And that is impacting the way that boardrooms think about the decisions they make. Because if somebody comes and says, I want to deliver a new project in print media, or I want to deliver a new project in marketing services, well, that's only worth between 4 and 10 times the profit that it makes. But if I can build an information or a data business, if I'm a B2B company, that's worth 15 times what the profit it makes. If I can build an events business, it's 15 times the profit it makes. So the impact on the final valuation of the decisions that we make is having a material effect on the way that people think about their businesses right now, because there's so much M&A going on. So just finally, one key factor, an external factor outside the framework that we can't escape, is the power of the big tech gatekeepers, the 4 GAFA companies that control content distribution and digital advertising. In the case of content distribution, Google controls more than half of the traffic from the Western internet in terms of referral traffic. Here you can see it. Referral from Facebook is another important source, but not quite as important as Google. We've spoken about the dominance in digital advertising already. But I think the key message here for us as an industry is there are signs that the power of these tech giants is going to be more closely regulated in the future. If you look at the legislation that is out there at the moment, I'm just going to read from my list. You've got the EU's GDPR legislation, which is triggering privacy legislation worldwide. You can expect to see a US federal privacy law in the next 5 years. The California Privacy Directive imposing very strict restrictions on all of us about how we operate. The EU Copyright Directive, which is having an impact on Google's businesses and other businesses in the same space. Courts across Europe falling down on the side of us, on the side of the content providers, rather than on Google's side. In Australia, the Australian competition authorities are determined to end Google's dominance of digital advertising market. The UK government is shortly going to publish a report in the same direction. US Department of Justice, and so on and so on. Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act. There's lots and lots of legislation happening. What are the 2 key messages here? The first one is that we as an industry must work together on these initiatives. We're allowed to work together on these initiatives. Policy is something that affects all of us. It's very easy for us to just step back and let the association deal with it, let somebody else deal with it. We must all have a stake in this because this is our future, is making sure that we have a level playing field. We're not trying to break these companies up. We're not trying to destroy them. We're just trying to be fair. And at the moment, the relationship is not fair. The other thing that's important, the second thing to watch, is Facebook. I think there's a very real chance that Facebook could implode within the next few years. It may seem ridiculous to say it. I've been told recently that there are senior people at Facebook who've told Zuckerberg he needs to resign. If he resigns, who knows what will happen because it's a one-man company. Nothing happens at Facebook without his permission. So we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. Very important for us in terms of referral traffic, very important in terms of our social presences for our brands, a little bit important in the advertising world as well. That's another key thing to watch. The pressure on Facebook seems to be unsustainable. So, where are we now? We're at the end of the beginning of the future, I would suggest. It's easy to be overwhelmed by the changes that we're facing. These changes are only going to increase in frequency and in impact, but this has to be seen as an advantage and as an opportunity. And I genuinely believe that there is no better or brighter time to work in this industry than right now. This is the best time in history to work in this industry because of all these fantastic opportunities that are out there. The print industry allowed us to grow for 100 years. We need to take the profit that we've made from that and reinvest it in these new opportunities. If we sit on the profit and just give it to the shareholders, we're not going to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. But if we seize these opportunities, we can build businesses that last for another 100 years. So we're at the end of the beginning of the digital age. I think the next few years are going to be very interesting. If you want to learn more about FIP, you can go to our website. You can write to me, james@fip.com. Follow us on Twitter. But crucially, if you enjoyed all of this and you want to learn more about the industry, you want to hear from some fantastic speakers, then do join us next year at our Congress, a few hundred kilometers that way in Lisbon. In 2022, the World Media Congress. We look forward to seeing you all there. I hope that was useful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, James. Thank you so much, James. You just have to stay there. Great speech, lots of food for thought for all of us, so thank you. Y ahora me complace invitar a subir al escenario a Concha Iglesias, a quien ya conocéis y que es una parte inherente de nuestro foro. Concha es socia responsable de la industria de medios y de la práctica de clima y sostenibilidad de Deloitte y una colaboradora y aliada fundamental. Concha y James van a profundizar en algunos puntos de la presentación y también atenderán vuestras preguntas.
Hello, James.
Hi.
Well, hi, everyone. Morning, and really grateful to Yolanda and to Ari because we are right now here physically and not with the screen in the middle. So I think that this is for you, Ari and Yolanda. Second one, James, you finalize your presentation with a positive conclusion. This industry needed. Yeah, you hope so. And this industry needed. So my purpose of the dialogue that we are going to have in the next half an hour is trying to focus on the topics that maybe give examples, concrete examples, in order to help them to capture the opportunity and come to the reality. You have the possibility to make questions, so if you have it, please hand your hand. And I also have questions by my phone. So let's start with the dialogue. First of all, I wanted to introduce some notes that I take during your presentation with the 6 topics that I feel are really positive. First of all, you say that digital media brings with enormous opportunities. I wanted to see. Second one, you say that your focus needs to be on sizing those opportunities and not go and think, not trying to hold back the challenger. Third one, you say that the industry has become hugely more complex, but you see in this complexity opportunities related to customers and also to having more revenue streams. And you say in the 5 that you must have multiple revenue streams. And the 6th one was customer data and data strategy. And you say also, okay, to have the opportunity to convert this opportunity into reality, you need to focus on, you say 4 enablers. I wanted to speak related to 3, to technology, to the culture and talent, and also the 3rd one, of course, sustainability. So let's start with the first one. And I think that the audience wants to know something that is so relevant from this side, and what is happened with the disappearance of the third-party cookies. I really feel that the advertising model, of course, is changing because of that. And you, of course, you have the possibility to reveal the ecosystem with tools that bring the reader closer to the publisher. So what's next? What is, because of the disappearing of the third-party cookies, what's next? And maybe if you could give us some example about companies that are working on it.
Sure. Well, I think that the disappearance of third-party cookies, when it happens, it seems to be a little bit confusing as to exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. But when it eventually happens, I think will be a very positive thing for our industry. There will be some short-term impact on digital advertising. It will make it a lot harder to generate revenue. But if we take the right steps, then actually it can be very good for us in the long term. The key here is that you've got to start building your own picture of the audience and the consumers that you interact with. There are plenty of companies that do this really, really well. If you look at the big players in our industry, Meredith, Hearst in the UK, Immediate Media, Burda in Germany, Axel Springer, they all have very, very good data strategies. Probably Burda, the big German company, is the most advanced. They've had a chief data scientist on their staff for a long time, so somebody whose job it is just to look at data and how they collect it and how they analyze it. And I think the technology point to it, which is you must have a data platform, which is a difficult thing to get and difficult thing to get right, but once you've got it, then it becomes a business discipline. How am I going to ensure that I capture consumer data in everything that I do, every interaction that my consumers have with me? If they turn up for an event, how am I going to check them in and know that they came and know who they are and add that to their record? The whole point of doing this is that we know from a digital marketing point of view that the successful way you launch these consumer revenue strategies that we spoke about in e-commerce and in paid content is by, first of all, going to your biggest fans. And you can only do that if you know who your biggest fans are, and you can only know who they are if you have a data platform. So it becomes an absolutely critical path from one to the other. If you look at companies that are launching, there's a couple of big, I can't say who they are at the moment, there's a couple of big UK magazine publishers that are launching paywalls around their very large lifestyle brands in the next few months. They've done exactly this. They've spent the time building the consumer profiles, and now their marketing is focused on converting those fans from free to paid. I think in both cases they're doing it with a premium content offering, so they're not, the basic website stays the same, but there's more content if you're prepared to pay. And they know the type of content to create because they know who the people are and they know what they like. So it becomes this virtuous circle of operation.
So if I understand you properly, maybe this helps the companies to equalize the position, the landscape between the digital giants and also the media traditional, and maybe change the chart that you saw before?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's really important that we don't forget the traditional media in creating the data strategy, right? Because we have an enormous amount of data and an enormous amount of fans and consumers who interact with us in traditional ways. We've got to figure out how we can capture that data as well and include it, because those people are going to be the most loyal, the most long-standing customers. They're the ones we want to convert into digital activity. You know, there's this idea that somehow older people, more loyal people, they don't do stuff digitally. Of course they do. Everybody does now. You know, my mother-in-law, my 80-year-old mother-in-law, uses Amazon. So there's a sense in which we have to be reflecting the consumer need that is out there. And I think the other thing that this relates to as well is trust, that we spoke about, and we're going to speak about it in a minute. But my mother-in-law, my 80-year-old mother-in-law, will transact with a magazine brand because she trusts it. She doesn't trust some person that she sees on the internet, but she trusts the magazine brand. So I think that leveraging that trust for transaction is key as well.
Yeah, I will try to help you. Your mother-in-law is young, so...
She's 80.
80?
She's 80,
it's young.
Yeah.
It's young.
She thinks she's young, but she's not young.
So, come to the second enabler. You speak about culture, about talent, and of course it's so related with the third one, with the sustainability, but then we will speak about it. And maybe we think that in this landscape, it's better to have innovative people than maybe experienced one. And it's a matter of balance of it or not. And I wanted the concrete question is, what are the differential capabilities that in this scenario the companies need to have, and in which area it must be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest capability the two capabilities that we really need to add as an industry, well, let me start the other way. What are we really good at? We're incredibly good at creativity. We're incredibly good at creativity. And we've done that for, 100 years. We're incredibly good at journalism. We're incredibly good at building a brand, actually, as well. If you think about magazine brands you have on your tables there, something like an Elle or a Vogue or a Vanity Fair, fantastic brands that we've built. But honestly, what are we not good at, because we've never really had to do it, is product development and marketing. We're not good at marketing. We have to be honest about it. When it comes to product development, in the traditional world, we would launch a new magazine maybe once every year. Maybe half of them would work, half of them wouldn't work. That's not good enough in the modern digital world. You have to be launching products more continuously than that. You have to be prepared to close them when they don't work and invest in them when they do work. But I think the other crucial thing is this marketing capability that we lack. We, for 100 years in magazine media, didn't really need to do marketing very much. We spent some marketing money in the newsstands to put, cardboard in front of the newsstands, and we spent money on cover mounts. That's not marketing. You have to look at it, I think, from the opposite point of view and say, what is the example of a company that has done the reverse of what we're doing, and use that as an example. The best example is Netflix. Netflix was a marketing company. They had no content at all, started out sending DVDs. And they were really good at marketing because they acquired this big customer base. And then they got to a certain point and they went, well, that's not going to be enough anymore. Because what do we lack? We lack what we have, creativity, that kind of creative talent. So now they've started investing in creating content. And they do it pretty well. They're probably not the best, but they do it pretty well. So they've got that magic combination of a great marketing function with a fantastic creative function. We've got a fantastic creative function. Imagine if we add a Netflix-style marketing capability to it. Imagine what we can achieve. Because we've been doing creativity longer than Netflix has, and we're better at it than they are. Right?
Yeah, it's a good example. I really believe that pay TV is a good example to say that you have the best content, but of course you promote to others that you have it. If not, it's impossible to capture you. So
I thought, sorry, just one more thought on that. I thought it was really fascinating. I went to a conference, the last conference until this one, before coronavirus, January of 2020. I was in Miami at a big meeting of all the American publishers, digital publishers mainly. Every single one of them, the topic of conversation was, how do I take my journalism and get it onto Amazon Prime or Netflix? That was all they were focused on, because there was this recognition from the publisher's point of view that this was a great way to get content onto these platforms and to make a lot of money, and I think they all wanted to win Emmys and all this kind of stuff. But from the platform's point of view, they're going, yeah, actually, the journalism, one story that you create in Vanity Fair is enough for us to make a whole series, because it's so good, and so creative, and so well written, such good journalism. So this kind of, interaction between these two worlds is something that we must build on.
great. But as always, you need money for making marketing and promotion. I don't know if you are saying, if I understand properly again, that the companies must reinvest the profit that they have in order to push this area that maybe in the past doesn't push as much as needed.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's, most people, most companies now will have made all the cuts that they need to make to have a profitable print business, let's say, or profitable legacy business. I think it's a huge mistake to take that profit and just keep it. You must reinvest it. You must reinvest it in growth, and you must be prepared if you're, and it's difficult, right? Because a lot of, let's be honest, a lot of companies in our industry are owned by families. They're not publicly quoted companies. They don't have the same shareholder structures as some of these other big companies do. It's difficult to make that kind of decision. There are examples of companies that do this really well. You look at the Alla Media in Scandinavia, which is a family-owned news and lifestyle media business in Scandinavia. The family still controls the company, and they decided, we're going to invest in this area, in digital. And now they have a very successful paywall-based digital news business because they made the investment. So it is possible, but it's critical for us as an industry that we don't just go, I'm just going to take as much money from this as I can and then go and then get out because I don't believe in the future of it. There is an enormously successful and bright future here. And even if you don't want to do it, somebody will buy it from you, and it's going to be worth more if you've already done part of the transformation. So it's a huge mistake to sit on that money. We must reinvest it because the opportunity is enormous. One final example. You wanted concrete examples, good concrete example. In the UK, there's a business called Dennis, which published The Week. It's just been bought by Future. Dennis bought, many, many years ago, they're owned by a trust, so they don't have traditional shareholders. They bought, many, many years ago, a company, small company that allows you to buy cars, used cars, online. Now, when they sold the company, I should say, when they were originally bought, they were worth 120 million pounds. They sold just the journalism bit for 200 million. The car buying business is now so big that they're going to float it off separately on the stock exchange. I mean, it's an enormous business. From a little tiny, I think it was a 15 million pound investment. So they were prepared, and they didn't know if that was going to work because they had no experience with that kind of business. It's grown it and grown it and grown it, and now they have a division just around cars that they're floating separately. So it is possible, if you really believe in it, to build these kind of digital businesses that have scale and value.
Yeah, great. So come to the third one. I love it, sustainability right now. If we are here, we need to speak about sustainability nowadays.
Yeah.
I really believe that if you wanted to stay in the ecosystem right now, you need to have the answer to the stakeholders, and they are the analysts, the investors, the financial sector, but also clients, suppliers, sponsorships. They are demanding this topic inside the company. So if you think about sustainability, the first topic that you come up is environmental side, and it is in your presentation. But maybe you need to think in each industry what is the key topic to differentiate in sustainability.
Yeah.
Because, of course, environmental is in the infrastructure sector, financial sector, or any one. But in this case, the social one is the side. And I really believe that if we integrate the topic into the brand, maybe we have a possibility to not only have a must-have, but a nice-to-have in order to make profitability. And I want us to speak about it. What do you think, and what kind of examples do you have of companies that in the media side are working properly, sustainability side?
Well, I think The Guardian, the newspaper in the UK, The Guardian is a great example of this. They have a very good, strong commitment to covering sustainability as a topic as part of their journalism. I think that's a really crucial factor for us as an industry, is we must be educating consumers on this sustainability topic. I think the debate about whether it's real or not is over. Everybody accepts that it's real. All the consumers accept that it's real, except for maybe the tiny amount of them. So we now have a social responsibility, as you quite rightly say, to educate consumers. The Guardian does this well. They have a fantastic strand of climate journalism. They're now asking people to fund that climate journalism through their fundraising efforts as well. So it's a kind of a nice kind of virtuous circle business. But I think if you look at the dynamics of sustainability in terms of how it's implemented, the best examples are the BBC and National Geographic. Those two companies have had sustainability policies for many, many years, many decades, and they cover the entire spectrum of everything that you would expect in sustainability. So they cover, of course, print and paper, but they also cover the human aspect. I used to work alongside a guy whose job it was to fly to China and inspect factories, so that when BBC or National Geographic products are being made in factories in China, that they can be sure that the workforce is properly treated, that the building is safe, that they have fire escapes, that they have, and you would be amazed at the stuff they found. You know, they would find people, if you're having stuff made in China and you don't know where it comes from, there are people chained to the desk making stuff, they live under the desk. I mean, it's horrific. So these kind of practices are things that, if you're a big reputable company, you want to make sure that you're playing a role in getting rid of them. Of course, you want to do it for a moral reason, but also there's a kind of future-looking reason there as well, which is to say that at some point, this is going to be enormously damaging to your brand if you don't do that. So I think it's really important to have that end-to-end view. We have a unique position, as you rightly say, in society, because we have the ability to make a social impact, and we must do that through our journalism, through our content.
I think that we have a topic on the table related to try to promote credibility and to avoid fake news.
Yeah.
This is the opportunity, obviously, for the sector against other platforms.
So that's another big social responsibility that we have.
Yeah. And I really believe, related to the topic that we speak before, the talent, it's absolutely relevant inside the company. It's absolutely relevant outside the company in order to answer the stakeholders' expectations, but also inside, how to try to capture the best talent, innovative talent. New generations demand this.
Yeah, definitely. There's, you know, if you think about somebody who's coming out of university, they have a choice about where they can work, right? And they're going to look at your workplace versus a startup, versus an established business in another sector. If your workplace doesn't measure up to what they expect, they're just not going to work there. Yeah. Or they're going to join and then they're going to leave. So, I mean, it's talent acquisition and retention is a big issue for us.
Great. But they need new streams. You say that we need to have different revenue streams. And maybe if I look after you show great slide related to print side, to luxury side of brands. And I feel that maybe sustainability with these brands is more relevant than in other sites, in other targets. I don't know if you have information related to that, if this topic add value to these kind of brands and maybe new opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's just an editorial topic that you need to cover. You know, it needs to be included in everything that you do. If you think about the print luxury future thing that we spoke about, you think about a brand like a Vogue or an Elle, we have Elle here on the table. Fashion, sustainability of fashion is a huge topic. So there's no way that they can avoid covering that. It's something that the industry is talking about. How are clothes made? How are they recycled? What is the intensity, both in terms of the resources and in terms of the people in creating fashion? So I think it's becoming a default position for the topics that we cover, that sustainability has to be a part of that. And you see it in every sector, whether it's cars, fashion, doesn't matter. It's going to be there. And that doesn't matter whether you're a cheap weekly magazine or a big luxury magazine. It's going to be there.
Definitely. I think that you need to have a storytelling integrated with the strategy and integrated, of course, with the brand. Yeah. And this is that you are going to show to the others. And then there are so many initiatives different on the environmental, the social, and the government side. But on the top, the strategy and your storytelling is absolutely crucial. Yeah. I don't know if it's there any question from you, Yes, we have one. Could we have a
Do we have a
microphone?
microphone? We do, somewhere. I saw somebody with a microphone earlier. Just shout.
Well, good morning, James. Thank you so much for your valuable insights, and Yolanda and Heidi for organizing this.
Oh, here we go. He's bringing a microphone for you.
Hola. Hello. Yeah, hello. I'm Michael Novak, Luike. Just a single question. You talk a lot about investing or reinvesting profits. What would your elevator pitch be to the board in terms of the mix in a traditional publisher, in terms of what do you want to devote that reinvestment to, content, marketing, or technology?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the simple answer would be all of them, because you can't do one without the other. And I think when we were talking earlier about new capabilities, that's kind of a part of that, is you must have the technology capability, the marketing capability, and the product capability, and combining those into a single team. Successful businesses seem to be the ones that do that combination of those things without seeing them as silos. I think I would go one step back to the board. I would start by saying my elevator pitch would be, if you don't do this, you're not going to have a business to worry about, which I think we all accept is the case. And then if I had to focus the conversation, it seems to me that the most of that focus at the moment is on paid content, building the right kind of organization for paid content. And there's a good rationale for that. So if you're talking again to the what do boards like? Boards like questions that have a kind of answer that they can only say yes to. So the question you ask them is, don't you think our journalism is worth paying for? Now, if the board says no, then you're in the wrong business. But of course, they're going to say yes. So if our journalism is worth paying for, then why aren't we charging for it? That's the elevator pitch. And that's the simple, fundamental message. We do variations of this presentation for individual magazine businesses. The question we ask them then is, sit down and ask yourself honestly, would you pay for this journalism that you're creating? A lot of the businesses can't give a positive answer. The ones that can give a positive answer are the ones where you're ready to start doing paid content digitally, because your journalism is so good. And that's most of us, right? Most of our journalism is so good that, of course, we should be charging for it.
Thank you. Another one?
Good morning, James. Many thanks for your presentation. It was very interesting. I'm Gabriel Jimenez from Axel Spring in Spain. I got two questions. Regarding, you were talking about the luxury future of magazines.
Yeah.
And I want to know how to convince the new generations, the leaders of the future, in order to buy the magazines, because they don't have any trust in magazines because it represents the past. And related to this first question, how to convince the different advertisers in order to invest in the print segment, because I don't know how it's working in the UK, but in Spain, many of the advertisers are moving from print to digital because they want a direct return on investment. So how do you plan to do it?
You got me onto my favorite subject with the second question. I'll answer the second question first. This idea that you can measure this direct return on investment with digital advertising, particularly with things like Facebook and Google, pardon my French, is horseshit. Because Facebook doesn't tell you what the money you're spending actually delivers, and we don't believe the data they give us anyway, right? Facebook have an addressable audience for advertising in America that is larger than the population of the United States. So there's something wrong there. So this is what I don't get, and I'm not an advertising person, which is why I'm so strident about it. I don't get it from an outsider's point of view. For 100 years, when we dealt with advertising in print, we spent a lot of time and money insisting that this stuff was audited, the circulation was audited, the readership was audited. Older people will remember we used to argue about how you calculated it and what constituted a sold copy and da-da-da-da-da. With Facebook, we just let them do what they like, and we don't insist that they're audited because, oh, it's Facebook. You know? So there's a pushback there to say, I think the positive pushback is to say, look at how well we can prove who our audience is, what they're responding to, the quality of them, the fact that the content is read, because we have all those tools and all those metrics in our hand. You're never going to get round the perennial problem with the agency advertising model, which has been there forever, which is not the agency's fault. It's just the way that agency advertising works, right? Which is that there's a mismatch between the reality of the responsiveness of this media and what they spend the money on. That's just always been there, and I don't think there's any easy solution to that. We've thought about solutions where we go in and try to get the more junior, because it's quite often the junior people in the organization that are dealing with magazines now, going in and trying to get them engaged with magazine media, understanding a bit more about it. We produce, still in America, the fact book, which is a kind of, this is why magazine media is so great. I think we just have to carry on with all of those things. But really, for me, it's about diversifying your advertising revenue streams so that you're not so reliant on that agency display relationship. You're doing native, you're doing programmatic, whatever it might be. But to answer the first part of your question, I think it's a really good and interesting challenge. And when I say we're bad at marketing, that's the thing that we're bad at marketing about. There's no intrinsic reason why a young person should not read a magazine, right? They sit there, they'd be perfectly happy if you put a magazine in front of them, they look at it, it's on a subject that they're interested in. It just doesn't come into their lifestyle, because we've not figured out how to integrate our marketing messages with their lifestyle. There are some brands that have done this. Airbnb in the States have done it. So Airbnb have a magazine now, which goes to the people who use Airbnb. Porter, which I displayed earlier, which is an e-commerce business aimed mainly at younger people who buy clothes online. They have a magazine because it's a good marketing tool. So I think there are ways you can do it. The key, I think, is making a magazine feel part of the community that they're in. So you've got to work out what it is that younger people think of in terms of their community of interest and find out how you integrate the magazine into that. And it may mean, I think one of the things that may mean is not using the same traditional distribution channels that we've always used. So, of course, a 25-year-old doesn't go to a newsstand and buy a magazine because they don't go to a newsstand anyway. Why would they go to a newsstand? They don't smoke anymore. They don't chew gum anymore. They don't eat chocolate anymore because it's bad for you. So there's no reason to go to a newsstand, So I think there's something there. Maybe it's integrating with new delivery. I was thinking for a long time that, everywhere in every city in Europe now, there is home delivery for everything, right? But driven mainly by Amazon, but also driven by a bunch of other stuff. You can get your groceries delivered, you can get everything delivered. How can we as the magazine industry take advantage of that? You look at markets like, and this is a big topic in Italy, where in Italy the postal system doesn't work, so you can't do subscriptions. So how can you deliver magazines to people's houses? Use the network that's been built by Amazon to deliver magazines instead. So it's a complex position. I think it's exactly the right question to ask. And building our marketing capability to answer that question is the key. Because there's no reason why a young person shouldn't read a magazine. They're not allergic to them or anything. It's just that they don't read them,
Great. I think we are out of time, Yolanda. Yeah. So the next, a friend of the sector, Celia Villalobos, Director of Agencies and Strategic Relations of Google Spain. She is going to close the forum. And then afterwards, also a friend of the sector, Lola, and part of the sector, Lola Fernandez, representative of the Board of Directors of Connectia and General Director of Street Press, will farewell to the session.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Yolanda, por la invitación. Para mí es un honor estar aquí hoy. Estuve hace 3 años y volver a compartir este momento con vosotros es muy importante y desde Google lo que mostramos es nuestro apoyo a la industria de la información y el entretenimiento. Si pensamos en el sector de revistas, yo creo que hay un pilar fundamental y es la tecnología, ¿no? La tecnología no solamente para revistas, sino para otros muchos sectores. Y James antes ha hablado de la parte de e-commerce, ¿no? Si pensamos en el e-commerce, en el año 2020, en abril y mayo, hubo la misma demanda de e-commerce que en los 10 años anteriores, con lo cual seguir trabajando en tecnología es básico para el desarrollo del sector. En ese sentido, en Google en tecnología estamos trabajando en 3 pilares fundamentales. El primero es el apoyo a todos los emprendedores y las empresas en todo lo que tiene que ver con la digitalización. Cuando hablamos de digitalización, lo que estamos diciendo es ayudar en los modelos de negocio, ayudar a generar empleo de calidad y ayudar también incluso en la internacionalización. En este sentido, en Google anunciamos a principios de este año una nueva sector de fuente de datos, que al final lo que va a ayudar a todas las empresas es a poder generar proyectos en la nube, algo que es súper importante para el desarrollo sostenible de las empresas. El segundo reto, yo creo que nos enfrentamos en tecnología, es todo lo que tiene que ver con ciberseguridad. Si hablamos de la ciberseguridad, al final no solamente afecta a las empresas, sino que también afecta a los propios individuales. Nosotros en la parte de ciberseguridad, yo estoy encantada porque además es muy cerca de mi tierra, hemos lanzado un centro de excelencia en Málaga. Ese centro de excelencia va a trabajar en las mejores prácticas de ciberseguridad, tanto en Europa para el resto del mundo, con lo cual es una oportunidad para España para desarrollarnos en ese sentido. Y el tercer punto, que a mí me encanta, es todo lo que hacemos en la ayuda de la capacitación en competencias digitales, ¿no? Algo que para nosotros es clave y desarrollamos muchísimos talleres, desarrollamos formaciones para muchos sectores. Pero si hablo del sector de las comunicaciones, ¿no?, de todos los que estamos aquí, no sé si habéis escuchado hablar de Google News Lab. Nosotros lanzamos Google News Lab y para mí es una iniciativa súper bonita. ¿Por qué? Porque a día de hoy hemos formado a más de 15.000 periodistas en nuevas herramientas, en nuevos formatos, ¿no?, que ayudan a que vuestras revistas quizás tengan un toque como mucho más data oriented, ¿no? En este sentido, a mí me gustaría hoy terminar diciendo que, bueno, que para Google es muy importante el compromiso que tenemos con vosotros en seguir formando a vuestros equipos y a vuestros periodistas. Y eso al final lo hacemos de la mano de ARI, ¿no? Entonces, a mí me gustaría que siguiésemos trabajando el año que viene en toda esta formación, que para nosotros es clave para seguir desarrollando una industria, un Internet que sea sostenible y que sea largo en este tiempo, ¿no? Y para nosotros esto solo se puede conseguir con contenidos de calidad, que sois los que vosotros hacéis, y sobre todo contenidos diversos, ¿no? Y al final aquí vemos un montón de revistas con muchos contenidos. Así que muchas gracias, Yolanda, y un placer.
Buenos días. 1000 perdones por mi voz, que me ha pasado factura el cambio tan brusco de tiempo que hemos tenido. Ha sido maravilloso poder celebrar de forma presencial este 10º Foro de Revistas. Muchísimas gracias a James, a Concha y a todos los que lo han organizado, con Yolanda y Ramón a la cabeza, Ari Conectia. Muchas gracias también a Google por el patrocinio y a todos los colaboradores que son Cedro, Deloitte, Protec Media, SAPI, la Asociación Nacional de Distribuidores de Publicaciones y la Unión de Distribuidores Nacionales de Ediciones. Ha sido muy duro lo que hemos vivido recientemente y podemos estar orgullosos, las revistas magníficamente aquí representadas, de haber estado a la altura en las circunstancias en las que nuestros consumidores, los lectores, necesitaban mucha profesionalidad, necesitaban información, por supuesto, pero también necesitaban sosiego y ocio, y se lo hemos proporcionado entre todos. En este contexto tan difícil, a mí me gustaría hablar del trabajo que hace Conectia, que basa la información, que es la materia prima de todos nosotros, la une a formación. Si nos damos cuenta, la palabra información contiene formación, y esos son los dos núcleos fundamentales de nuestro trabajo, la investigación y la actualidad. Y también, ya que estamos aquí reunidos por fin de forma presencial, pues si nos damos cuenta, la palabra reunión también contiene la palabra unión. Es importante que las revistas, el mundo editorial, se mantenga unido, y esa eficiencia que hemos demostrado, esa profesionalidad y esa eficacia para nuestros lectores, nos gustaría desde aquí pedirla para todos los proveedores que son parte importantísima en que nuestro trabajo llegue a buen fin, y también de la Administración. Esos recursos de los que hablaba Nadia Calviño al principio, pues que lleguen efectivamente a buen fin y nos ayuden a seguir haciendo nuestro trabajo. Bueno, gracias a todos por este 10º foro y siempre, hasta pronto.